Welcome to the 14th episode of Bodha, the Dharmika view of everything. Today we have two very special guests with us who are joining to speak on the topic of Christianity. We have with us Esther Dhanraj ji, a very well-known grassroots activist, ex-Christian, and currently serving as the Director of Community Outreach in Hindu University of America. She has been very vocal about the philosophy of Christianity, how it harvests souls, the techniques it uses, and the philosophy of Hindu philosophy vis-a-vis Christian philosophy. Namaste, Esther ji. We also have with us Vivek Rallabandi, with whom we had a previous episode. We spoke on the theme of Christianity. Vivek is a up and coming research scholar who has written a very comprehensive paper called The Culture Question, the conceptual underpinnings of Christianity and proselytization of Christianity and native day resistance in Andhra Pradesh. So Vivek will be fielding the questions to Esther ji, and we look forward to a very good and engaging conversation. Welcome, Vivek, and let's begin the conversation.
So namaste, everybody. Very much looking forward to it, and thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, Esther Garu, for joining us for this conversation. So the first question that I wanted to start off with was, if you sort of trace the history of Christian proselytization in India and you look at the worldview with which it was starting out, it was very much you wanted to save the souls of the heathen that were living in India, and you wanted to basically, there was a eradicationist mentality in terms of this hoary ancestral idol worshipping faith, namely Hinduism, that was ruling the roost at that period of time. So we've come a long way since the colonial period in terms of time, and now we're talking about post-colonialism and decoloniality. But to what extent has the missionary gaze toward India evolved or not evolved since the colonial period and that line of thinking?
First of all, namaste to all the viewers of Brihat. It's a joy to be talking about my book, Future of Christianity, the Past of Christianity, and the overall the conversion scene in India. So to answer your question, Vivek, I think whatever Christianity, whatever agenda Christianity started with, there's no change in that agenda. They are still going strong. I would say they've only become aggressive in their approach um, in the context of India and the conversions in India. There has been growing up, when I saw Christian missionaries, they were not so active in the neighborhoods, in local neighborhoods, or in corporations or school and college campuses. They were not so out in the open, so aggressively trying to get numbers onto their side. So whatever the colonizers did to India, I don't think there's any change in how these people have taken it over, taken the baton, and have are running with it now. What definitely changed now is the syncretistic model. So Christianity is very syncretistic in nature, right? So if you even look at the history of Christianity, early Christianity, they took some elements of the Roman practices, the Roman pagan practices. They took some of the Jewish, then they mixed some of Greek and Egyptian. They put this all together, and then they came up with this new cult. Originally, a cult that then got elevated to the status of a religion. But the point is, they have brought in all these elements and they've come up with a new religion. That hasn't changed. So every country that Christianity goes to, this is exactly what it does. If you look at India, I think it has continued. That is how they came into India. But then for a brief period, I would say in this epoch of time, in the brief period, they stuck to saying that this is how a Christian should be in terms of identity. That is how they erased the the Hindu identity in India. They've stripped the Christian converts of everything Bharatiya, everything Hindu. So like in terms of the bindi and all that. But now I think they have come back to or gone back to being syncretistic again. Take, for example, Punjab. Now they're saying you can keep your turban. But back when my parents got converted, my mother was forced, I mean, she was pressured, although she didn't succumb to the pressure until the very end of, my father's life. She didn't succumb to the pressure of removing her bindi. But that pressure was there. Now, when you see it in Punjab, they're saying you can retain your turban. You see what I mean? Now they're coming up with the Dhwajastamba, they're coming up with issues Sahasranamam and Suprabhatam, Yesu Suprabhatam, and stuff like this. So this was not there earlier. So
Okay.
to conclude that whole thought, I would say that all this is just to hasten up the whole process of converting, Christianizing India. Because by now they know that we are very strong in our, regardless of which deity we worship in India, we're very strongly rooted in our culture and we love our Hindu identity. That's what they have figured. So they're saying you can keep those elements, but just replace the deity.
Sure. And I mean, I think that's a very interesting phenomenon. That's a phenomenon that I've looked at a little bit in my own work. And so that's why, I mean, just following up on that point that you were making when you're, I guess, looking at the shift within from sort of outward cultural erasure to sort of a more syncretistic model. I guess the question is, within that syncretistic, model, is that actually enduring in the sense that is is that something that's sustainable once you enter into Christianity, this sort of syncretism with Hinduism, or is it merely sort of an intermediate point until you become completely ingrained into Christian society, Christian faith, and then those Hindu elements, those syncretistic elements are dispensed with afterward?
You are so right. So in Christianity, there's this formula. Remember this: all or nothing. They either want all or nothing. So the syncretistic model is just to draw in people. And then the church ecosystem is so strong. It's so well formulated. It is so well developed that once the person goes in, um, even with the syncretistic model, even with the all the Hindu elements, Hindu identity, and all that, eventually you will see that the convert that has gone in voluntarily removes those. Dispenses those that identity, the Hindu elements and Hindu the cultural identity. So yes, to answer your question in just one word, yes, the syncretistic model is eventually, at some point in the Christian new converts journey, it's gotten rid of, and that happens automatically. And the church ecosystem, I would say, kind of makes it seem so voluntary, and makes it seem like there was no pressure from us. It is God who spoke with them. It is they by themselves who just removed those identities. Happened in our case. Every
Hmm.
single conversion in my home, I mean, there are 7 conversions in my home, and every one of them, this is how it happened. And because Hindu identity is more in a woman, they wear
Right.
Hindu identity more openly than a
Outwardly,
man
yeah.
does in urban societies. So it was more conspicuous. The shift was more conspicuous in the women in our family.
And I think absolutely right. I mean, if you go to, Andhra Pradesh today and you just, I mean, I think one way that you can identify someone, a woman who's Christian versus Hindu is just, are they wearing the, bindi, are they wearing the tilakam or not? That, it becomes as simple as that in so many cases to actually, because that has sort of become this barometer of, whether or not you're within that cultural tradition slash faith or not. So absolutely. I guess kind of, sure, go ahead.
Talking of Andhra Pradesh, when you go through those, when you're traveling through those villages, those remote villages and hamlets, the the only emotion that I can feel is cry. I mean, I'm really crying inside, looking at the deserted look, the widowed look that I call these villages where once used to be those rangoli and those toranas to the the entrance of homes and gobar smeared floors. You don't see them these days. You don't at all see them, and women don't even wear color anymore. So this is this very very widow-looking Pentecostal brand of Christianity that sells in remote villages across India, especially Andhra Pradesh. So yeah,
And so I guess to that point is it sort of austerity that's being promoted, within the teachings and a sort of, sort of dispensing with any sort of festivity, joy, or any of this? I mean, how is that correlating to the theological teachings?
so yeah, they in the garb of promoting austerity and in the garb of promoting what do you call devotion, I would say, to make it very a common term, they're actually doing away with the Hindu identity. That is their whole agenda. That's their only agenda. And where vibrancy, where there's color, the greens, the reds, the oranges, and all that, that's so Hindu, right? That is so Hindu. So they want to do away with all of those colors. But if you see the Pentecostal churches in the US, I
Hmm.
mean, you know it. I'm not sure how many churches you went to. There's so much color in the church. I've seen women wearing blues and greens and fantastic reds, maroons, purples. These colors you don't see in Pentecostal communities in India. Why? So they equate color festivity to Hinduism. So and
Right.
they
So
have to
even
do
though,
away with.
right. So even though that's not necessarily, that austerity or lack of color is not intrinsic to the faith tradition itself, merely because it's associated with, their ancestral faith of the converts, according to you, that's why, they want to dispense with that at any cost.
Yeah, yeah.
S- So in that vein, I mean, just kind of looking at the transformation that occurs within converts after they're entering into Christianity, I wanted to talk about, sort of native Christianity more so in the Indian context. And, what I want to talk about specifically is, and I think you allude to this in the introduction to your book as well, which is once someone is actually converted to Christianity in the Indian context, and so they become a convert, they become, the proselytized. At some point, they're expected to become a proselytizer, right? In the sense they need to attract other people to the faith. They're expected to attract other people to the faith. So can you talk to me a little bit about that paradigm, how the proselytized becomes the proselytizer, and how what that impetus is for the new convert to attract other converts to the faith?
There are several dynamics at work in this aspect. So there are two kinds of evangelists, okay? Two kinds of proselytizers, the career evangelists and the lay evangelists. So every Christian is a lay evangelist. Some take it up as a career and do that for a living. But regardless, every Christian is a lay evangelist. What I mean by that is, like I said, the church ecosystem is so strong. And one of the requirements for you to be called a Christian is to go to church every Sunday, be part of that church family, of that church ecosystem, wherever you are in the world. So when you are going to a church week after week, and when the pastor is talking to you directly, uh, saying that you have this burden of converting others, you have found good news, you have found salvation, you are going to spend your eternity in the company of God in heaven. Don't you want to extend the same to your loved ones? They are perishing. They are going to spend their eternity in hell with Satan. So, don't you want to extend that to your friends and family that have never heard of Jesus, never heard the good news? So, that burden is automatically put on the Christian, the churchgoer. So when a new person, a new convert is listening to this message day in and day out, imagine the psychological pressure that is on them. Because again, in the Indian context, the new convert is surrounded back home, family, friends, everybody is non-Christian, right?
Yeah.
Even if an entire family converts, that family's extended family is still Hindu, they're not Christians, right? So this burden is put on this family now to bring their um, uh, friends and families also to the church and to Christianity. So that kind of messaging really plays on one's psychology. So that is how new converts automatically become a proselytizer.
Right. So I think this point that you're making about family and sort of separation within and among families and among communities, and I think at least within the context of Andhra Pradesh, which is what I'm most familiar with, I mean that is sort of that has become a common thread that has run through so many of these proselytizations is sort of the schisms that it creates among families and sort of the resentment and you talk about that even in the introduction to your book and sort of your own estrangement in some sense from your family members because you chose to leave the faith whereas they continued to remain. So can you talk to me a little bit more about this family separation? Would you say that it's a feature, it's sort of by design within the way that proselytization plays out in the Indian context, or is it more of sort of an accidental symptom? And how does it really play a role in the actual conversion process? These internecine conflicts that occur among families.
So, first of all, nothing is an accident in the proselytization method of the proselytizer. Although more often than not, the one that is getting proselytized is barely aware of the agenda that the proselytizer comes with. So there are no accidents. The proselytizer knows exactly what he is doing and what his or her end goal is. So this conflict, this resentment, I think Hindus, like I said, Hindus, the one that is getting proselytized, and the family that is not directly getting proselytized by this pastor or proselytizer evangelist that has stepped into the life of this Hindu family, uh, they don't know. They don't know what is going on. For a Hindu, uh, for generations, we've been told that, all religions are the same. All gods are, worship to any deity will still lead to the same destination. So that's what we've been told, right? At least before the age of the internet, that's what people used to think. There are still a ton of Hindus, majority of Hindus still are of that opinion about religions. So a Hindu, by design, is respectful of other religions. So when a pastor comes and into a Hindu's home, into a Hindu, trying to convert that family or an individual from that family, The Hindus, the extended family, including this family that is getting proselytized, is not even aware of what is going on. They just see it as the good nature of Christians to step in and see that, oh, they're actually, this pastor is so concerned. This pastor has brought in his church, opened the doors of his church for my family. So we find some solace or spiritual counseling, spiritual guidance, and a lot of times material help also. So, but then what happens is this conflict, this resentment begins with the Christian side. So the family that's getting proselytized and the extended family, look at them as two units or one unit, two units within one big unit. And then there is the Christian unit, right? There are two parties involved here, and in one party, let's separate them as two. So the resentment, the conflict begins on the Christian side, because the Christian is always, at least initially, when they have started their work with the family, the proselytization method with the family, the ground is shaky, right? There is always this chance of this Hindu relapsing, you know.
Right.
So they make sure, the Christian makes sure to plant those seeds of resentment in this Hindu's mind, in the sense, oh, you cannot go to the festivals, you cannot accept their invitation and be part of their festivals, you cannot go to the temple, you should not entertain them in your home a lot. So they start, they plant the seeds of separation in the mind of the person, family that's getting proselytized. So that is how it begins. And then when the extended family sees that, oh, these people are just going aloof, I mean, they don't want to hang out with us anymore, or they don't want to come to our homes anymore, they don't want to partake in our festivities or eat eat the prasadam, or even food, even regular food that is not prasadam. The Hindus are, the proselytized family is discouraged from being a part of those festivities and all that. So when the extended family sees that this is what is happening, they kind of go stay away from them. Although they are happy to, whenever this new convert family invites their family. I mean, I'm talking from my experience. So when my family used to extend the invitation to my extended family, my aunt, my cousins, to come be a part of this Friday, the weekly prayer meeting, they were happy to come and
They were
join us.
they were Hindu, they were not Christian.
All Hindu to this day, yes. So they were happy to come join us.
Right.
Whereas with my family, of course, as long as my parents were around, they were happy to be part of their festivities and all that. And until very recently, even my siblings were a big part of my of the festival celebrations like Ganesh Chaturthi or Diwali that my cousins used to celebrate. My siblings used to be a part of that, but I was talking about the shift, right?
Yeah.
So these days, the brainwashing has completely shifted to, aggression. So now I don't see my siblings interacting much with my Hindu families, especially during festivals, and all that. So yeah, the resentment is initiated by the Christian side, and they make sure that the gap, the barrier, grows bigger and bigger.
And you mentioned this term that you've coined, extians, about people who are coming out of the faith. You mentioned that in the introduction to your book, this term that you've coined, right? And I think you also allude, as you've just alluded to in the answer that you gave, to, because the schism between your ancestral faith and culture and this new faith and new world that you've entered into is so wide. The difficulty of perhaps making a clean break with Christianity and with this faith that you've adopted is high. It becomes very difficult to actually want to sort of come back to your ancestral faith, even though that's what you may desire to do. So can you talk a little bit about that? Would you say that's sort of again a deliberate part of the strategy, so that it's very difficult to actually jump ship, so to speak, once you've adopted the new tradition?
Yeah, Christianity is, I mean, for that matter, any religion or devotion to a deity is very much psychological and emotional, right? Intellectual comes much later. So, and in Christianity, there's never an intellectual angle. It's very emotional. And as a Christian, you are encouraged to have a personal relationship with the deity, the central deity, which is Jesus. So it's like divorcing, after 25 years of marriage, it's like divorcing and then starting afresh. So I can speak from my experience, but I can also speak from what I have heard, what people have shared with me, people that have left the Christian fold have shared with me. So let me first talk about myself. It was a difficult decision. First of all, it was 25 years is not a small time, and the time that I quit Christianity, I was still in the seminary, and that was the very first semester of my seminary studies. And the intention with which I went into a seminary is to become a pastor. In your introduction to this talk, to this interview, you said uh, what you said was exactly correct. So I wanted to become a pastor, go back to India and save souls, because India apparently was perishing in idol worship. So that was the reason I went into the seminary for. So I knew it was a 4.5 years to 5 years journey, plus the 25 years that I have lived as a devout, fanatical Christian. And even if I knew that was all false, that was all a big lie, and I felt cheated in that moment, I I couldn't just dump it and jump ship instantly. It was more like I was traveling in this ship called Christianity in this huge ocean. Uh, I'd rather jump out of the ship and fight fight to stay afloat in the wide ocean than jump into another ship. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
I
So I would
understand what you're saying. Yeah,
just jump out of the Christianity ship. Um, and while I was struggling to stay afloat, I didn't want to make the same mistake that I did with Christianity. So, first of all, I had to make sure that that ship was dangerous. That ship was not the right one for me. So, that journey is excruciating, to say. I mean, that's an understatement, actually, what a Christian who has just left the Christian fold undergoes. So, I jumped out of that ship, but I couldn't immediately I didn't even have that mindset, because I had to make sure that the ship that I had just jumped out of is really worth abandoning. I didn't want to be wrong. Um, I didn't want to. I wanted to come out of it fully informed. So I wanted to be an informed quitter, informed XTN, that I would like to call. So this journey is very important. After abandoning Christianity ship, and the in between time that takes place, the journey that happens, the thought process that a person goes through before she or he jumps into another ship.
right.
So, and I really wanted to be an informed devotee this time, if you will.
I understand. So sort of the last question that I wanted to ask you from my end is that, I've on some of on posts and videos related to things that you've done, I've seen people commenting and saying that, okay, what you experienced was not true Christianity, that this was sort of this was not the true spirit of what Christianity is or is supposed to be, this sort of aggressive proselytization and missionization that you experienced in your own experience, and that you're making these kind of wholesale comments about Christianity as a faith writ large, but you haven't seen the real Christianity or the true side of Christianity. And I guess evidently you would reject that characterization because you decided not to remain with the faith and to say, okay, well, the missionization was Christianity diluted, or this was not real Christianity, and that there's really something to be found in the faith. And that's interesting because, I mean, if you look at groups that have historically borne the brunt of Christian proselytization, such as Native Americans here in the United States, they've made a variety of choices. Some of them are they want to make a clean break with Christianity. Others, while acknowledging the colonial legacy, they want to sort of syncretize Christianity with their native traditions. So you see a variety of responses even after this reckoning. But for you, you wanted to make a break with the faith wholesale. So can you talk to me a little bit more about that and why you would reject those characterizations of Christians who will say to you that you haven't really experienced the real Christianity, and you've only experienced the negative side of it?
Yeah, it's interesting, but also very sad. That actually explains that should tell you how Christianity has very few explanations to why Christians could leave Christianity. So this, after all those apologetics and the full, well-rounded apologetics, I mean, defense of Christianity, all those arguments, the one aspect that hasn't been explored by Christianity is why people leave the Christian fold. So they don't have many explanations. They only have one, actually, if you look at it. And that one is what they have peddled about me, that when somebody leaves Christianity, it's because they haven't been a good Christian to begin with. Now, what is a good Christian? I've been a Christian for 25 years, right? And if I was not a good Christian, the blame is on God, right? On the deity that I was worshiping. 25 years I have given to him, and he wasn't able to change my heart to be a good Christian. Because Christian theology, when you become a Christian, you don't become a Christian just by virtue of being born in a Christian home or just because your parents are Christians or they have converted to Christianity in your childhood and you start going to church. You don't become a Christian like that. You become a Christian with the full understanding of what you are doing. So when I became a Christian, this is called a born again experience. So when I had a born again experience, it means that I have become a Christian with the full understanding of what it means to be a Christian. Going forward, what it means to worship Jesus, what it means to be devoted to Jesus. So when a Christian becomes a Christian, when a person becomes a Christian with this kind of understanding, and then grow from there, there's only one way to grow from there, because you are part of this brainwashing ecosystem now that you go to week after week. There is no way that you will uh, go downward. So once you become a Christian, you only grow in your faith. From there, you only go upwards. Your faith goes upward. Now, with that background, is it possible for me to be a bad Christian? For me to not have understood the Christian message accurately? If that is true, then I would put the failure, the blame on the pastors that mentored me, the churches that mentored me, the churches that I was a part of, and the Christian God himself. Because I was having a personal relationship with the Christian God, and prayer is supposed to be a conversation with God, which I used to do every day, twice or thrice a day, and keep fasts for that God, which means in Christianity, fasting brings brings the the believer closer to Jesus. So after all these spiritual disciplines, every spiritual discipline that was that has ever been written about Christianity, I practiced it. But still, I have been a bad Christian. I put the blame on God because he utterly failed in retaining a devout person like me. He failed in keeping me committed to himself. So I would put the blame back on him. Now, coming back to their rationalization or the lack thereof, I would say that I would pity them because not much uh, literature has been developed around why devout Christians like me leave the Christian fold, get disillusioned. Yeah, it's not just me. I mean, MLK Jr., Martin Luther King Jr., suffered from disbelief. He went to a seminary following his father's footsteps, and he did Christian theology, and he even had a doctor of theology. He has a doctorate in Christian studies, but rejected the core fundamental beliefs of Christianity, which is the virgin birth, the resurrection, the second coming of Jesus, the existence of a hell. I would say, what else is left of Christianity? Nothing. So he rejected Christianity in its entirety. But he was preaching in a church. So what was he preaching about? He was all, if you actually look at it as a Hindu, you could tell that he was teaching the Hindu message. He was teaching that all men are equal. He was teaching that this whole world is a big family. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, right? So Martin Luther King rejected the Christian faith, but he today is projected as a devout Christian by Christian groups. Charles Templeton, I've spoken about this a lot of times on different platforms. Charles Templeton is a very, very famous evangelist of the early 1900s. I mean, 19 not early 1900s, late 1900s, which is 80s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. So he and his partner Billy Graham are two evangelists I would give the credit to for proselytizing half of India. This guy goes to a seminary because he's disillusioned by the fact he couldn't wrap his head around how a good God can send someone to hell. Why there is original sin, because Adam disobeyed. So he did not understand those aspects. He couldn't wrap his head around all these aspects, that too after evangelizing half the world. So he goes to a seminary to get a better understanding of this theology, and then he comes out quitting Christianity. There are a number of examples that I can talk about that have become disillusioned after practicing devout fundamentalistic variety of Christianity for a decade or two. So I would think Christianity as a community should sit down and evaluate the reasons why devout Christians leave the Christian fold sooner than later.
All right. Well,
So,
thank you very much.
coming back to your question, I mean, let me sum it up. Yes, they have very few, in fact, only one explanation to why someone like me would quit Christianity. So we should pity them, and I'm not offended by their, it shows their lack of rationalization and their lack of intellectual explanations to things like this. That's all I can say.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Esther Garu, for your time. And
Jay,
I'll turn it over to Anshuman to wrap it up.
Jay, before we wrap it up, I would just like to ask one concluding question, and it had been on my mind since reading your recent tweet, a very thoughtful thread, which I'll try to attach below this conversation as well, in which Estherji writes about the conversations that uh, Mother Teresa had with the Vatican, in which she writes letters saying that even after proselytizing so much, even after converting so many people, I feel a darkness in my heart. I feel an emptiness in my heart. And Estherji just used the analogy of jumping ship, as in it after having invested so much of your time in a particular faith system or a belief system, I think it becomes very difficult to leave it, even though you feel that inertia and hollowness in your heart. Estherji, I wanted to ask, is it due to the one part of it is the investment into that, but is it also the lack of an alternate ship, so to say, the lack of Hindu outreaches to people who have converted to Christianity, or is it in toto Christian problem, so to say? Your thoughts?
That's a very important question that the whole Hindu community should actually sit down and take notice of. You are very right, Anshuman, in saying that it is the lack of Hindu outreach in the world, I would say. So, anybody that quits Christianity in the West, they become atheists. Now, I was lucky that I was born in a country. I was born in Hinduism, and I was born in a country that is inherently Hindu. So I had a very good, a great, well developed, and much more sophisticated, philosophically sophisticated ship waiting for me. I just had to get into it. Not everybody is as fortunate. I always say this. Not everybody is as fortunate as me, especially those that are born and raised in the West that don't know of any other worldview. And we as Hindus have utterly failed in reaching out to the world, and we have a great responsibility here. Sometimes when I read Teresa's autobiography or biography, I would think, just imagine, at the peak of her um, distrust or lack of faith, that emptiness, that darkness that she calls, at the peak of it, imagine a Hindu philosopher or a Sanatan Dharma thought leader getting in touch with her and trying to slowly introduce her to the concepts of Sanatan Dharma. I mean, just imagine what that could have done to her. I'm not saying she would have abandoned Christianity and converted to, become a Hindu, embraced Hinduism. I'm not saying that is the extreme step, but we don't know. We never know, right? There's no way of telling it now. This is not true just of Teresa. There are a number of people like this. All those Christians that have quit Christianity today, that have turned atheists and have become powerful voices for atheism today, they could have given a chance to explore Sanatan Dharma, right? If only we did our outreach, if not as effectively as the church, at least half or a fourth of it or a tenth of it, we would have had less atheists that have come out of Christianity today.
Absolutely. And hopefully, since there is a new rise of consciousness in Hindus, we hope that the day is near when Hindus have a great outreach model and they can reach out to people in need, not just Christians, to all the people around the world who are in need with the greatness of Hindu philosophy. Uh, Thank you, Esther ji, for this great conversation. Thank you, Vivek, for hosting it and for posting such beautiful questions. We hope to have you both again soon in our conversations. And we look forward to your upcoming book. And we'll be delighted to meet you if you are ever in Hyderabad. So thank you, Esther ji.
Thank you so much, Anshuman, for having me. And Vivek, awesome questions. Thank you for those questions. I mean, I take all the questions as moments, opportunities to talk about this whole monster called conversions. Thank you so much for having me.